Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Sheik, and today is June 10th, 2014, and we're in the Oklahoma County Cooperative Extension Office interviewing Mr. Rod Moesel and his mother, Miss Marjorie Moesel, as part of the Voices of Extension Oral History Project. And I just want to thank you two for joining and participating with us. Miss Marjorie, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your early life. When and where were you born?
I was born and grew up in Canadian County, southwest of Yukon, and went to a rural school, West Point, a one-room school for the first 8 grades. And then high school, I went to Yukon High School.
What year were you born?
1931.
You were a Depression baby.
You know, it's fortunate, though, that those of us who were born in that area, most everybody was kind of in the same thing, so you didn't realize you were poor. So that's good.
Everybody was in the same boat. How did your family come to live there?
My mother's mother and grandfather came in on the run, and they each made a thing, but settled on a piece of land. But my father's family came in after the run, but he was born and raised and lived his whole life within 9 miles. So that was pretty interesting.
What were your parents' names?
My father's name's Frank Ball, B-A-L-L, like basketball, football, and my mother's name was Sarah Nee, and Allen was her maiden name.
Okay. And what was your mother's? What were your grandparents on your maternal side? What were their names?
Ida Bird was her mother, and her father's name was John. But her parents died when she was young. Her father died when she was, I think, 5, and her mother when she was 4 or 5, and her mother about 3 years later. So she was switched around a lot. So family was very important to her.
Family raised her. And
well, not just, I'm talking about when she was married and all. Family was extremely important.
Really made an influence. And Mr. Moesel, where were you born and what year?
I was born in 1954 in Enid, and then soon after that, Dad went to work on his master's at Ohio State up in Columbus, Ohio, and then later went to Rutgers, and then Mom and Dad wanted to come back to Oklahoma, and we ended up and started growing up at Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, and that's where they worked for another operation for a while, and then started their own truck cropping operation, and ran that at Pauls Valley till '63, and then had the chance to take over a garden center and greenhouse operation in Oklahoma City in '63, and raised the rest of the way in Oklahoma City.
And what was your father's name?
Richard Hubert Moesel.
And what did you say what year you were born?
1954.
1954. And so we understand what your parents did for a living. They continued that then through your childhood?
Mm-hmm. Different phases of horticulture my whole life, and their first business their own was a truck cropping operation, and then as Mom and Dad raised enough money or had enough, they'd buy used greenhouses and got in the greenhouse business, and then kept growing the greenhouse business, and had a garden center and then a nursery operation, and then had the chance to move to Oklahoma City and did that, and grew quite really an operation people drove from all over the state to see in Oklahoma City for many years.
When you say greenhouse business, are you talking about growing plants in the greenhouse, or are you talking about building
growing plants in the greenhouse? Okay. They had a business called Moesel's Hort Haven, which stood for horticultural haven, and so it was a plant collector's paradise, I guess you'd say. One of the more amazing collections of all different kinds of plant material. So.
Where was it located?
Actually, just down the road from the current extension center at 4315 Northwest 10th, and so it had been Alex's greenhouse for many years before they bought it in '63, and then it operated till Dad's passing and after 2000. So So it operated for over 40 years here in Oklahoma City as Moesel Sword Haven.
Is the building still standing?
Building's gone now. That land has just been cleared and is waiting for what its next assignment in life is going to be. So.
I want to tell a story about when Rod was a little boy while we were in Pauls Valley. We did do a lot of truck gardening, and we also did experimental things with a lot of different kinds of plants. And he was probably about 4 years old at this time, and we had the extension service, had a big open house, and then people would come from all over to see about the things that we were growing, and Rod would take people through as one kind of guide them through and people come sometimes and say, well, I want the little boy to show me through. I'd have to say, well, he's taking his nap now. You can't. So he started out young.
Do you remember any of that?
I'm not sure I remember the 4-year-old part, but I do remember.
He did a lot of work.
I do remember when I was very young, even at Pauls Valley, I'd a lot of times be helping customers, or a customer would come in and they didn't want the little kid, somebody hadn't met me, would not want the little kid helping them, so they'd ask for an adult. Then the adult would later, well, that was mainly here in the city, but it happened down there too. Then it was always fun when the adult would then have to come ask me a question and I'd have to answer it too.
That particularly happened after we came to Oklahoma City, and there was an older man that had been working at the greenhouse, and Rod would say, can I help you? And, well, no, son, I'd like to have somebody else. And they'd go ask Lloyd, and Lloyd come over and say, Rod, what? Finally they decided, that boy knows more than we thought he did.
Cut out the middleman, start with him.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Another really good story is how Rod got in 4-H. You might want to ask him about that.
We will. In fact, you have talked about your early years, so you were exposed to the Cooperative Extension Service at a young age. Were your parents, was the Extension Service around when you were younger?
Yes, my folks were both volunteer leaders, and my older brother, older sister, a next brother, and myself and my younger sister were all involved in 4-H. And but yes, we were very involved, and Mother was very active in the Home Demonstration Club, we called it at that time, and Dad was a forward-looking farmer, and we had again a statewide thing where people would come, and we were one of the first ones that were really doing much terracing and things like that.
So they'd come and visit your farm.
Well, they had a day-long field day, and they even had a check hall that fed the meal and stuff. But yeah, so, and we had a dairy farm, a diversified farm. We did all kinds of things. So
didn't a number of your brothers and sisters, several of you went to Chicago, didn't you, in 4-H club work?
Eileen went. I think she went in poultry. And then Dick went in soil conservation, and I went in gardening. And then Dick went also 1 year as a Santa Fe winter. At that time, you could go twice. If you went Santa Fe the next year, you'd go as a project winner. And I went in gardening, and the next year I was a national achievement winner.
And so I understand how those winners are selected, but can you describe that process on how those were selected with those projects?
Well, we still did it as record books, but the record books were much more involved at that time than they are now. Although now they want to be very concise, you have to have just exact margins and everything, but then you really did have a lot more involved in your record books, and it would be a record of what all you have done in 4-H.
Do you remember what some of your record books, your gardening record book that you won to go to Chicago, what did it contain? What all did it have in it?
Well, about how much we grew and how much, production and all of that, because it was over a number of years. You didn't do it just in 1 year. But
So did you start 4-H at the typical age that we start now at 9, or was it younger?
Yes, no, it's 9, because now they start as clover buds quite a bit earlier. But then it was 9. So, but I had 3 older siblings that were already involved. And so I'd been in, already pretty much knew all about 4-H, so I was anxious to get in.
You've been tagging along.
Yeah, sure.
So four of the 5 kids in your family all went to Chicago.
I don't think Phil did and Ruth didn't, but 3 of us did.
Okay.
But Phil won a trip to Denver, and I always remember they did a dairy demonstration, he and his cousin, and he came back and they were only gone. It was the first time he'd been away from home like that. When they got back, he kneeled down by my little sister and he said, "Ruthie, do you remember me?" I just thought that was so funny. He'd been gone maybe 3 or 4 days at the most. You know, it was a big trip for him, and so that was...
Seemed like a long time.
Yeah. But all of us went to Roundup, and all of us were involved in a lot of different activities.
So what do you remember about your Chicago trip? How did you prepare for that?
Well, we got to go on a train at that time, you know, and that was always a lot of fun. I think even when you went, didn't you get to go on the train?
One of my 3 years was on the train. That's when they changed, was during that time.
And
Train was better.
yeah, it was fun because you really had a lot of fun with all the other ones that were going. And at that time, the ones who got to go to to National 4-H Club Congress were project winners, or there were some Santa Fe winners. And then if you had been a national project winner or even a state project winner, you had a chance. The only chance you had to go back the second year was to either win achievement, leadership, or citizenship. And so those were the 3 opportunities. You had to go back another year. And then I did actually go for a little bit of a 3rd year because I was on my way to National Junior Vegetable Growers Association meeting in Detroit, and they had me stop and do a little bit there before that. But it was just, but I would like to say that some of your agents and all are they're very important to your work. And we had an exceptionally wonderful home demonstration agent. She just died a little over a year ago, I think, Margaret Edsel Fitch.
Yes.
And she really, I think, I've been involved in 4-H lots and lots of years now. And so she was so good, you know. And then I remember, of course, Alice Carlson was our woman 4-H leader at the time I was involved in 4-H. And then we've had lots of them all through the years that meant a lot to me. But
what did Margaret Fitch do? How did she influence you? What things did she do that made her so different?
Well, she really showed an interest in every one of us, you know, that were in 4-H. And she not only was doing 4-H, she was also doing home demonstration work too. And so, and she always had such a nice smile, and you know, she really was a good influence in all of our lives, I think. She set good standards, and you know, she'd help you in any way she could.
Did she have a certain way that she tracked everybody's progress, or was that kept on record, or do you remember any of that?
No, I don't remember that particularly, but she knew what was going on, that's for sure. And one thing that was influential, I thought, for me was that she was involved in the El Reno Business and Professional Women's Club. And one year I got the Woman of the Year, and I knew that was, of course, because Margaret was the one who had pushed that, but I was just a girl, and that was really, you know, the only time they'd ever done that, so that meant a lot. But Margaret, I won a trip to Boston to the National Junior Vegetable Growers Association meeting, and we went together, and so, you know, I just had a lot of opportunities to do things with her. But
she was a lovely lady.
She really was. I mean, there's no question about that.
And so, describe what your 4-H meetings were like back then in those days.
We usually we did learn parliamentary procedure, and we would have, of course, our salute to the flag and to the 4-H motto and all that. And at that time, we'd talk about the 4-H's, and the 5th H was the home. And that's not said anymore, but that was at that time. And then we would have, usually different ones would do a demonstration or a talk at our meetings. And sometimes we'd have recreation. I don't know, we always did. I don't remember that we had food to eat or anything like that, though we might have. I was a member of the Big 3 4-H Club when I was in grade school, and that was 3 rural schools. and it was Mustang Valley, and West Point schools. And so one time we'd meet at Mustang, next time maybe Mustang Valley, next time at West Point. And so you got to meet boys and girls from other schools as well and work with them.
But they called it the Big Three?
That was the name of our club, Big Three. And then we went to Yukon while I was Yukon. I was in Yukon high school.
And about how many 4-H members were in the Big Three club? Do you remember that?
No, I don't. But probably, I think it's pretty much everybody in the school, so probably it's around 50, I guess.
How far were the schools apart? How far did you have to
Well,
travel to go there?
Schools were on 3-mile,
Increments.
yeah.
Little small schools.
I mean, that's how they set up in Oklahoma Territory. Was
So were those dependent school districts that then you went from there to the high school at Yukon?
yeah.
And Mr.
But then see Mustang Valley went to Mustang Valley did. I think Mustang went into.
Mr. Moesel, tell us about your early 4-H days. What do you recall about those first years?
Oh, I remember most of them pretty clearly, I think. I'd always grown up hearing about 4-H stories from Mom and from uncles and aunts when we'd come to Oklahoma City to visit them at Yukon and so forth. So I'd known and had looked forward to joining 4-H. And the summer before I was going to turn 9 when I could join 4-H, well, we moved to Oklahoma City. And so I didn't know how that was going to affect everything. And because, a lot of people are saying, well, you don't have 4-H in the city and it's only, it's only in the country, so you're not going to have that chance. Well, anyway, I forget, Mom or Dad one called the extension office and got an address for the closest 4-H club, and it turned out it was an address on Northeast 23rd Street. And so on that Saturday morning when the first meeting was supposed to be, I think it was in September, probably, Dad drove me over to try to find where that was at. We went up and down 23rd Street, couldn't find any place that looked like it, and finally pulled into this 2-story stone building. It had somebody out front, and Dad asked the guy where this address was at, and he said, well, that's right here. This is the governor's mansion, and this is the 4-H club is meeting upstairs. And so it turned out Governor Bellman was in office, and his family were all big 4-Hers, and so that my first 4-H club meeting was that day on the second floor at the governor's mansion. That's the club I was in for several years before they went out of office. But Pat Bellman was our president, and Gail Bellman was vice president, and Ann Bellman was the secretary.
They had a corner on the market.
Yeah, Shirley Bellman was one of our club leaders, and so that it's always kind of a fun story of how I got started. And soon after that, I don't think she had started her big beautification drive, but maybe about the same time Shirley Bellman got all turned on to statewide beautification, made her project as First Lady Beautification, and so our 4-H club was at the forefront of all kinds of highway beautification projects, and we planted the circle bed at the Capitol and did a bunch of other public beautification projects. So right from the start, I was real involved in all those kinds of things, and so I don't know whether Shirley recruited the family to come into 4-H or whether just serendipity or whatever, but anyway, it ended up working good together. So,
are any of those projects that you worked on as a child, or any of them still in existence? Still, do you?
Oh yeah, I mean, a couple of things in the center, the circle beds at the south side of the Capitol are still there. I mean, all the color plants change every year, every couple of years, but and then there's a lot of other ones around town, and sometimes some come and some go, but there's still a few of those that are still around. So,
at that age, did you recognize the significance of having a 4-H meeting in the governor's mansion?
No, I had no idea. It was just 4-H club, and
nice house.
The Bellmans couldn't have been nicer to us, and ended up being a lifelong friendship with Henry and Shirley till we lost both of them, and still see and do things with the girls from time to time. So, and they're all back in Oklahoma now, and but I had no idea it was anything different or unusual. It's just the way it was. Mm-hmm. So, but I mean that also probably played a big role in my getting interested in Mom and Dad had always been very civically involved, but I mean, certainly being around Bellman opened the doors for me to be involved politically, and so I'm sure that became a big factor in how deeply I got involved in politics over the years, was that being there with Bellman and the chance to be exposed to a lot of that kind of stuff and to get involved.
So how have you been involved politically over the years?
Oh, I don't know the tapes long enough, but
That's true.
but I mean, you know, over the years I've been involved behind the scenes in lots of everything from. I had the chance to be deeply involved during the desegregation efforts and during you know, trying to figure out ways to make that work when all the busing issues and all were going on at Oklahoma City Schools, our school district during the time I was there. And my senior year I was student body president, but our school district went from 65,000 students my freshman year to 32,000 or 33,000 students my senior year, and it's still to this day the district has never really recovered, where Tulsa didn't get torn apart at the seams like that under their judicial order. Oklahoma City's was just torn apart at the seams and is still working to recover from that. But we tried as students the best we could, went to North Carolina to where the Mecklenburg case was at to see that. So anyway, we're involved in all those things, and I got deeply involved in Teenage Republicans, and then had a chance to be, after my 4-H report to the nation, the president got to see me in that role, I guess, in Chicago, and so then he invited me to come and be on the, can't remember if I did the White House staff first or second. I think I did that first. I went and did Youth Affairs Advisor to the president for a while, and then went into the Young Voters for the President campaign, and so did all that in Washington before coming back to start school at OSU and after high school, and then have been involved over the years in hundreds of governors and Senate races and corporation commission races, and you know, even this year I'm chairing a couple of different races. So lots of behind the scenes work and so forth in a lot of different things, and headed up property tax initiative petitions and statewide ballot issues, and so lots of things over the years. So.
Governor Bellman was a true statesman, wasn't he?
He was an amazing guy, and he and I had some doozies of battles. But I mean, one of the fun things with Governor Bellman is you know, even though we could disagree dramatically, you could still be good friends. I mean, we had our biggest fights probably about the Panama Canal and about House Bill 1017. But 1017, well, at the time he and I were doing together a governor's conference on small business. That was Oklahoma had not had anything like that, and he was big on wanting to promote, as I was, on wanting to promote small business and growth of homegrown businesses. And Shirley, in fact, started a big initiative that at the same time I was working on the small business thing, she started one on a home-based business deal that the Extension Service was deeply involved in, had a major initiative. And the Extension Service was involved in our small business conference too. But anyway, that first year we did the small business conference with Henry's backing, we ended up with like 1,000 attendees, and the next couple of years we got as high as 2,000 folks from around the state that were interested in small business and entrepreneurship, and trying to figure out ways to, the theory that you do better than, instead of just recruiting out-of-state businesses, of trying to grow your businesses at home and so forth. So we were trying to focus on that in that direction, and Henry was very much in tune with that and gave us just tremendous. It would not have happened or been as successful without his help and support, and then with Shirley's on the home-based business. But so anyway, that was a fun time where the Extension Service stuff and the Bellman stuff. Well, but anyway, during that time where I was headed, on 1017 came up during that time period, and he was very much for that. I thought we were giving up too much in taxes for not getting enough real change in this. I wasn't opposed for doing it, but thought we needed to get more, and so we had
Can you
fought.
describe quickly 1017 just for historical?
1017 was a state bill to put a lot more funding to common schools, which, like I say, probably needed to be done, but we weren't getting much reform or much change in exchange for the big new tax source for common schools. So he and I and others, certainly wasn't at the forefront, but we'd had many great personal debates about it. And but he'd invited me to this meeting at the top floor of the governor's mansion with all the top business guys in the state. I mean, I was like the token small business guy from heading up the Governor's Conference on Small Business, and there's everybody from Mr. Gaylord from the Oklahoman to the heads of OG&E and PSO and Kerr McGee at that time, and so we're like 75 businessmen up there of the top biggest businesses in the state, and somebody had assigned seating, and I happened to be sitting at the same table with Bellman and with Mr. Gaylord, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was Jim Harlow from OG&E that was at the table and so forth. And anyway, Bellman had dinner been served, and then Bellman stood up, was making a pitch for why 1017 was needed, why he needed the business community support, and he wanted to discuss it. Well, I mean, the appropriate thing, I was just a kid, I was probably still in my 20s somewhere, but I mean, should have been to be shut up and stay on the sidelines and watch. It was an amazing place to just be at that moment. But one or two people spoke. Well, I stood up and said why I thought it was a bad idea, and spoke up about how I respected him but thought he was headed the wrong path in this deal. And so as I was going back to sit down at my table, I heard Mr. Gaylord leaning over to Mr. Harlow saying, well, that'll be the last time that young man ever gets invited to the governor's mansion. So which, for a while I didn't know whether Henry would not divorce me because we were just, but whether we'd say, but sure enough, a few days later at 5 or 5:30 a.m. you get the early morning call from Bellman asking about something. So, because he was a real early bird, but so even though we had strong disagreements, I'm sure he was not happy about my speaking up in that environment at that day, but we still were able to be good friends and still respected each other. So that's something I've always respected, the political leaders that are able to respond like that. There's some others over the years that when you share your straight opinions with them, that's the last time you hear from them. But so
He was not like that.
yeah.
We lost a lot when we
Yeah.
lost him in
Yeah.
battle. So, can you talk a little bit, Miss Marjorie, can you talk a little bit about some of the leaders or agents you had? You talked a little bit about Margaret Fitch.
Mr. Tarver was our man agent, and that was during most of the time I was there. When I was first joined, we had a different woman agent, and her name has escaped me right now. But Zella King was one of our district agents at the time, and then I remember several of the extension specialists that I worked with quite a bit, and of course in horticulture, Mr. Whitehead and Mr. Garrett were both very active, and then I did a lot with Mr. Ware in poultry. And I remember one time I went, Mr. Tarver and Dad and my brother and I think it was Milos Hardy from El Reno. We went up to judge sheep at OSU, it was Oklahoma A&M at the time. But anyway, I happened to be the only girl there, and there were about 100 boys, 4-H and FFA boys. I happened to be the winner. And, I thought, ooh, that's really, because you kind of feel funny about winning when you're the only girl there. But I thought, well, that was interesting. The next year I tied for first. So I thought I was a better judge than I thought I was. But
the year that you won, what was the reaction from others?
They were all nice. But, one of the things from winning was you got to select a sheep to take home from the flock there at the college, which was very nice. Mm-hmm. So Alex McKenzie was head of the sheep area there at the college, and I remember him well. And then when we went to Pauls Valley, when we came back to Oklahoma, Cleo Stiles Bryant was our home demonstration agent there, and she was another very good agent. And
describe what made her good.
Well, I think always what makes them good is that they're interested in other people, and having an interest in what you're doing and trying to encourage you and all. She had I don't remember if she's the one that put us in for the Noble Foundation. Like I told you, we had the trials and all, and Noble Foundation was giving some awards, and my husband was involved in a very bad tractor accident. We didn't know he was going to live for a little while, and we came home from the hospital. They had brought him up to McBride's, and after he was in the hospital quite a while, we got to go home. And we stopped at the post office to get the mail. And there was a letter from Noble Foundation saying we'd won the state award. And the bank, local bank, let us go. It was a bond, a $500 bond. And they went ahead and cashed it for the full amount. And they held the bond to the full. I mean, everybody was so good to us in Falls Valley. But I was very involved in home demonstration work down there too, and worked as a 4-H leader while we were in Garvin County. And then when we came to Oklahoma County, well, continued that.
It may be hard to describe, but can either or both of you put it into words what the Cooperative Extension Service has meant to you as a family?
Well, of course, with me, it started out because we really were involved with the Extension Service a lot. And my parents were, I think, forward-looking people. They were involved in trying to improve the farm, and were glad to have the assistance from the Extension Center. And I've been reading the 100-year thing, and they were telling about how a lot of times a lot of the farmers were kind of hard to choose to do that, but I never felt that was true with my family, that we always were interested in trying to utilize all the advantages we could of the new things that were being introduced. And
as a mother raising kids and having them in 4-H, how do you think that influenced you as a family?
Well, they were very involved. I mean, they certainly, all of our children were, in fact, each one of them got the County Hall of Fame at the appropriate time level, and I still have their pictures. I keep them now. But, I think it did influence every one of them a lot.
Mr. Moesel did...
Why don't you call him Rod?
So after high school, what did you do after high school?
I was in Washington for a while with doing the White House and the campaign things. Then I came back a year later and started at OSU. And while I was at OSU, I was trying to figure out how I was going to help pay for college. So I started a business making terrariums. At that time, when people would open bank accounts, they'd give you a blanket or give you something. Well, terrariums were kind of hot, so we started doing terrariums and did hundreds, probably thousands. Actually, did thousands of those at different banks and then started wholesaling those, and that grew into the wholesale business that we have today of wholesaling everything from greenhouse structures to foliage plants to pots and soils and supplies. So everything horticultural. So that kind of grew out of that activity. So then over the years, I've continued to be involved in 4-H mainly from a foundation standpoint, and trying to help with the growth and development of the 4-H foundation, so that we can figure out ways to, I guess, return the favor to all those that Mom was saying her mom and dad were pretty forward thinking. I'd like to think that I guess that's where I can credit my mom and dad being forward thinking, because I think they were always forward thinking, always cooperating with the Extension Service and all kinds of things, from training 4-H and FFA teams from all over the state to growing different crops that the university or Extension Service wanted to look at, and doing field days and state growers associations and nurserymen's associations and all those kinds of things. So I guess that kind of got in our blood, and so we've tried to carry on those things. So it's kind of moved from generation to generation to generation, really. So.
Mrs. Moesel, you talked about being a 4-H leader, and I assume that was in gardening and some of those areas, or was it in other areas?
Well, gardening has been a part of it always, but I have truly always felt like, and there was one time we had a horticulture club here in the county, but I always encouraged all my 4-Hers to be involved in more than just one project, even when it was, because we had the Oklahoma City 4-H Club, and then we had the horticulture club too at different times. And now I do work.
She got a new club. She started 6, 7, 8 years ago. So.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, we call it Memorial Wonders, and it's we have a lot of different people from different backgrounds in that club. And, you know, I just encourage them all to take part in a number of different projects. So I always talk with each one of them about what their interests are, and I'll say, well, we've got lots of projects you can take part in, but, you know, some, and I really want them all to do some speaking, which some of them that's hard, you know. They don't want to get up in front of people and speak, but I think that's very important that they learn to speak to group or to individuals.
Has there been a story about a success story that you can think about with a young child that has just blossomed or
Well, that's the real fun of being a leader, that you get to watch lots of them do that. It's not just one. I mean, really, truly. I will tell about our youngest son, and he was very shy, and that over the many years I've been involved in 4-H, I'll ask a lot of times, well, what's your favorite thing about 4-H? That's the only person I ever said the 4-H record book, because it's not most people's favorite things. But he was shy, and I think he enjoyed the writing part of it more. But he's a college professor now, and you know, so having to do some of the things he really didn't feel as at ease at, and that's, you know, that's fun watching how they write their stories and all, and see that they have grown and changed. And that's a real rewarding thing to watch the growth. And I've been very blessed to see lots and lots of them do that. And not only just the ones in the clubs I've helped with, but the ones in the county or the state that I've seen grow up and change, you know.
I was going to say, in the current club that you've got now, that Mom was teaching English as a second language at church, and she saw a lot of these kids that weren't involved in school activities or other activities, and she thought, well, they need 4-H clubs to get them involved. So it's kids from Guatemala and Mexico and Nigeria, and as well as more traditional Americans. But it's really been fun to watch the confidence grow in those kids, and watch them now. I mean, now they've added all these chef activities in addition to the speaking contest.
One of the well, she's not little now, but anyway, one of the girls that when she first joined, and I think it was about the end of the 4-H year, I forget what it was, there's something I wanted her to do, and she wrote me a letter. Mrs. Moesel, I am quitting 4-H as of today. I will not do anything else. And so I was telling her last time we were working on our record books, I said, you patience, you know, I still have that letter that you, and she had forgotten about it. But she was, then in her story, she wrote about the reason she wanted to quit was because she was a lazy bum and she didn't want to have to do the work. And now, you know, she felt like it had really helped her to grow and all. And it is amazing to see some of them that are very shy turn out to be outgoing, and other people that, you know, think they can't do anything, and all of them have abilities. And you just have to help them realize, you know, you can do this. There are things.
What did you call that club? It's
our club right now.
Uh-huh.
Memorial Wonders.
Memorial Wonders.
We go to Memorial Christian Church, okay. And I let them choose a name, because a lot of them, to start with, we have other kids that aren't in our church now too, in our club, but that was, so they came up with several names, and then they decided Memorial Wonders. So that was.
About how many kids do you have in that club?
Right now we have probably a little over 20, if they're all there. Not all of them come all the time, but.
That patient she's just talking about, just the Nigerian girl, she just got picked for a Fleming scholarship at the OU Health Sciences Center. So for a summer program over there. So, but it's pretty interesting to watch all those kids grow and blossom. So,
because 4-H can mean a lot to kids who already are on a level playing field, let alone the impact it can have on those that need a little bit extra to even get it.
That's true. And you know, I think family being involved is very important, but always that's not true. Some of them don't have family that are very involved. And so sometimes, you know, you really are the one that helps push them along. And other times you have families that really work with you and help with the leadership and stuff. So
through that small 4-H group, 4-H club, have you seen any of the parents change or do any things different?
Yes, we have 2 sets of parents that work, with us quite a bit. And one of them is originally from Guatemala and one of them's originally from Mexico. So the parents came from other countries, but
They work with you. Are there any other historical things that through either one of your involvement with the Cooperative Extension Service that you've had the opportunity to observe?
well, one thing I would say, here in Oklahoma County, I think we were one of the first counties to start the Master Gardeners program, and that has been very helpful in getting a lot of people to come and learn a lot more, and then they have to put in so much hours of payback, and that's, I think, a good program. And we've had some really good agents here in our county too.
I'd like to go back, and I didn't get to answer the one about agents and so forth. Actually, the boys agent back in my time was Ozzy Oswald, but probably the one that had the biggest impact on me of the agents. We also had Ray Gregory, who was an ag agent, but Hugh Hedger was a horticulture agent, and went ahead and, in addition to his horticulture work, ended up doing a bunch of 4-H club work, and was really good, especially as we were trying to get urban 4-H going. Ray and Ozzy probably had a little bit more traditional viewpoint, and so both good men, but it was they had a little bit harder time adjusting sometimes to trying to bring more folks in from a more unconventional backgrounds, and Hugh was very supportive and very helpful on that, and later after his days here, he went to Kentucky. Then we got him back to Oklahoma to be the head of the new horticulture program at OSU Oklahoma City, and he helped start that program. So we were delighted to get him back to Oklahoma years later, and just recently lost him in the last few years. But and then there were just lots of great agents in other counties, and area agents and state leaders from Pete Williams and Ray Parker and
Mary Sue.
Mary Sue McBroom, who's now, I still think I just call her
I heard
Sue.
Mary Sue just started a new 4-H club. She lives in a retirement home out at Spanish Cove, and she's got a 4-H club going there now. And she works so much with ambassadors.
She started ambassadors, and
Is that Mary Sue Sanders?
yeah, we still think we're Mary Sue McBroom, but it's Mary Sue Sanders now. But she's been just amazing all through all these years, but both during her time working and then and she was really volunteering a bunch of times she was working, and then been a full-time volunteer for many years now. So, but adding that ambassador program on the statewide basis, and then through that she ended up getting Gwen Shaw and others involved to really make that program significant. So
We'll be interviewing Gwen next.
okay.
I think she comes in after you.
Gwen has no stories to tell.
Does she have any on you? That might be-
I'm
Probably
sure
she does.
Yeah, she and she was a couple years behind me, but but she went to Chicago. One year we both went together, so I can personally tell stories on Gwen from that year. And then we've been very active together on the 4-H Foundation for years, and Gwen's love and commitment for the 4-H program is phenomenal. So she's been a tremendous leader. So.
And a sister.
Yeah. Well, her
Dixie.
sister Dixie, and Dixie was a few years ahead of me. So in 4-H, you're always looking up as role models to the kids that are just a little bit ahead of you, because you maybe don't really know them, but you want to know them, and then you're watching what they do and how they do. So it's the kids that were just ahead of me would have been like the Dixie Shaws. And you were talking about record books earlier. I always remember they'd bring Dixie Shaw's record book, 12 inches thick or something like that back in the day. That's when you measured record books by the pound. So Dixie and Clayton Taylor and Mike Sinar and the Harps and the Webbers, and you can start
Larry
going through all
Berry,
the.
wasn't he?
Yeah, well, Larry Berry was further ahead of me, so I didn't really. I didn't know him as a 4-H member. I knew him later as Attorney General when he was running for governor. But
We'll be interviewing Mr. Larry Berry in a few weeks as well.
So I knew him in different ways, but he was far enough ahead that I didn't know him as an immediate role model. But that's one of the interesting things that that intergenerational thing is one of the things that makes 4-H work. It's the adult volunteers. And one of my concerns today is how hard we're making it for people to volunteer with all the paperwork and bureaucracy. I think we're screwing things up really bad on that. We've gotten too many lawyers involved, and it messes with the flow of things. But one of the great gifts of 4-H has been that mix of adults, not just your parents. Your parents are super important, but other adults having an interest in you, and then the older kids, the interaction of older kids helping lead younger kids. Mom was mentioning the one-room schoolhouse. There were a lot of magic things that happened in those one-room schoolhouses that don't happen in a school where you've got everything divided by grades. And that still happens in things like 4-H, where you have older kids working with younger kids. I mean, even today in business world or in church Sunday school, you learn way more teaching than you do by being a student a lot of times, and because you have to. It's just amazing what happens in that teaching environment. So the chance for older kids to help teach younger kids is huge, and it's an asset you don't really appreciate till later when you look back on it.
Because the younger kids really do look up to the older ones, and it gives them chance to do things that the older ones, things that they wouldn't. Because I know I was a young one volunteer when I was just, when I was in high school for sure. And so I talked about our kids all being in the county Hall of Fame, but Rod got the state Hall of Fame too, and that was really a very nice thing. And then the report to the nation, that was very, because they'd already done the report to the nation a year or two before you were.
It started at a couple. Clayton Taylor was the first person I'd ever known that had done that, and Clayton had gotten that, so that's the first time I knew it existed. And then
Describe it. What?
That's what 4-H at that time had instead of national officers. They had a thing called Report to the Nation, and so I guess states would nominate one or two people if they thought they had somebody who had that ability or interest or whatever. And then when you were at the year I was national leadership winner, well, there were interviews for Report to the Nation, and I was one of the ones selected for that. And then they J.C. Penney decked out, J.C. Penney as we called them back then, or Jacques Penney, I think is what we decked us out with this green blazer outfits and so forth. And then 4-H, we'd go around the country to meet with corporate donors to 4-H or to speak at other events. So there was a period of some years 4-H hasn't done that for many years, I don't think, but there was a period of some years when they had to report to the nation, and we in effect acted like a national officer team, and so they would send us out like national ambassadors, so to speak, to different things. So that's at the time I was in, the maximum time you could go to National Club Congress was twice, and so I went the first time in horticulture, which that was a big lesson because I didn't win at national. I won state and then went to national, and that was tough sitting in the audience because my record was clearly way better than all the people that won, and so it was a real lesson in life. Isn't always fair, but
well, they thought that no one could really do that.
I think they thought there was lying or stretching or something, but anyway, so that was quite an experience to sit there at the dinner, which we had wonderful dinners for the state winners and so forth. They made a big impression on you. That Chicago experience at the Conrad Hilton was something to behold for kids from Oklahoma that had never seen anything like all that. But they turn out all the lights and the flags, the spotlight goes on the flag, and it's got the wind jet blowing on it, and you're doing the national anthem, and then they come all of a sudden as the flag goes, as the song ends, well, before the lights go on, with all these waiters come out with carrying flaming dishes. I mean, it was quite the big city experience. But then the next time I got to go back was on the leadership. I think that's the year Gwen was part of our group. I can't remember which of the 2 years that I got to do the train. Then they ended the train, but I got selected for Report to Nation, so I got to go back the next year as part of the Report to Nation. So that was really special to get to go back a third time. So.
With the Report to Nations, who did you guys go out together in small groups, or sometimes they do individuals, or how?
Some of both. I mean, sometimes they'd send us. I remember several times went to like New York City and we'd meet with people like American Can and and then, or Campbell's soup or whatever. I mean, so some of them were trips where you're by yourself going to meet with somebody to say thank you or to make an impression. Other times it'd be a group of two or three officers, or like the next year when we all show back up in Chicago the next year for some events. But
And who wrote the speeches? Did you write them?
we did all of our own stuff. I don't remember. If somebody had written it, I wouldn't have used it anyway. So.
Did anybody have to approve it, or just you wrote it and they trusted you?
Maybe they trusted you, and if they didn't like what you said, they didn't invite you again. I don't know. I don't remember the specifics on that, but I don't think any of us they picked were using scripted things. They probably, I mean, I think at that stage we'd all been involved in 4-H for 10 years. We knew the program forward and backwards, and we all had strong feelings about what we liked about it. And we were all probably, all of us that got picked for that were ones that were fairly outgoing, fairly comfortable, and so we probably just went and told our story pretty much. So.
Were you guys required to travel with a chaperone, or did you get to travel alone?
No, we just traveled alone, as I recall. Like at Chicago, we'd be there with a chaperone, but I remember going to New York City. Flew up by myself, and flew back to Chicago to meet with people up there. And so I don't remember a chaperone with us or anything.
But you were older. I mean, you were.
It would have been like probably would have been like senior in high school type age, something like that.
Or maybe you just graduated from high school.
Well, just graduating from high school, I was already up in D.C. pretty much all day. It would have been somewhere in that time frame.
And so,
But like I say, there weren't near as many lawyers involved back then, so and we all grew up fine. There weren't national incidents or anything, but we all had amazing experiences. One of the other things, we've been working hard to get more scholarships for the 4-H program, trying to keep more older kids in. Too many communities, 4-H is being used as a starter program, and so we're anxious to see more kids stay in, so you get that intergenerational part, because I think that's a big part of the experience. And then the other thing I think we need to do is bolster more trips and more experiences, because it's those trips and experiences that make the memories and make an impact on young people for their lifetime. Certainly did on mine, and I've talking to lots of other people, it's been the same for them. So, and that makes your world so much bigger. I mean, my world went from a very small view to having a very big interest worldwide, but largely because of experience with 4-H and extension. So,
One thing that happened when I was in 4-H, my brother and I, after the third grade, were in the same class all the way through, because he took third grade over, which I'm not against. I think that's not good if you need to take it over to do it. But we had a foreign exchange student come through the 4-H program and stay with us a while, and he was from Wales.
and he was a 4-H member over there, so it was a 4-H sponsored.
Mhm.
I didn't realize they did that back then.
Yeah. In fact, Ernest Hellwig, who was in 4-H the same time I was and all, he was one of the ones that got to go over to another country too. He was from Kingfisher County.
And so they just brought one kid here.
Well, we just had the one at our place, yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily you guys that got to go take the trip back over.
No. I mean, you had to, have money to help pay for it all. We didn't do that, but.
And did you keep up with that 4-H member
Well,
after that, or?
Some. I don't know anything now what happened with, but.
Is there anything, looking back, that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about, a memory that comes forth, or?
I always think that it just is helpful to be able to do demonstrations and speeches and things like that. And really now I don't encourage my kids as much to do demonstrations as I do illustrated talks, because I think it's easier. And I want them to do it, and I want them to get involved, and then some of them will come into the other later. But it is fun now that I know some other people who are leaders who were ones that I helped when they were little, and now they're 4-H leaders, and that's a good thing too.
Who are some of those that are now 4-H
Well,
leaders?
one of them is,
Kelly Atkins.
well, yeah, Kelly certainly, but I'm thinking of the one here in Oklahoma County, was from Yukon, and she's a doctor. Oh, what's her name? Her husband,
Symes.
Yeah.
The Symes.
yeah, her name was Belinda Brody, and now it's Symes, but she's a doctor, but she's a 4-H leader, she and her husband. And their daughter is quite active in our county right
She's
now.
a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I'm sure she will probably be. I know she will be in our county, and I imagine she might be statewide. She's very good. And it's just, it really is fun to watch kids not only from your own club, but from around the state that you meet at different things, and then watch them grow and excel.
Anything else you can think of?
Oh, I mean, you could go on for hours and hours. There's so many memories. But I guess I go back to the trips and the people that meeting kids and leaders from all over the state. The impact that has. I mean, when I went to Washington D.C. for the citizenship workshop, I never got selected again because of we always had this battle in our county about whether horticulture and urban members were really 4-Hers or not. So some of the things there was a lot of politics involved at the time. So I never got to go to Kansas City or Denver, but was blessed to get to go to D.C. and had meeting kids from all over the state, and the way it broadens your viewpoint and the different things you get to see, and is just a remarkable experience that most kids that get to do that, and Roundup to a lesser degree for a lot of folks. And we haven't spoken much about Roundup. I mean, it's always fun when you realize, I think it was in your lifetime that it was called what we know as Gallagher-Iba Arena was the 4-H building. Most people,
Yeah.
It's a trivia thing now that's how they got it built, was as a state 4-H center on the OSU campus, and it, it's of course evolved into the famous and historic Gallagher-Iba Arena. But Roundup is able to include more people, so the impact that Roundup's had, the impact of those different trips. I mean, one of the greatest, as many great trips as I've had all over the world, it's still hard to beat those train trips going to Chicago. When sleep deprivation was the order of the day, and Mississippi River crossings and all kinds of fun stuff. So.
I have to say one thing that was very meaningful to me, and I think it was 2010 or 11 one, I was selected as a national lifetime volunteer, 4-H volunteer.
Wow.
And, that was really a wonderful honor to be able to be the representative of all the volunteers. And we can have a state, just 4-H volunteer and then a lifetime volunteer. And I think you have to done over 8 years or something to be a lifetime. But
I think you met that criteria.
yeah.
Well, we were excited when we heard you won state, and we
Yeah.
didn't even know there was a regional competition.
I
They
didn't.
called and said she had won regional, and then we had no idea there was a national, and they called to say she had won national. So it was a really cool.
That
And
is
I
fun.
was blessed that Rod and my daughter Eva, and she was actually the one who wrote up the thing, I think, to nominate me for that, which I didn't even know was happening. And then our youngest son Douglas, so all but our son Bruce got to be there. And they didn't, none of them felt like they could all be, their husbands and wives weren't there, but the kids were all there, which was really special.
Where was that awarded?
It was in Omaha that year. It was given at the time when the extension agents meet, the national meeting, and it's not at the same place every year, but that year was in Omaha.
The 4-H Agents Association.
Extension, I think it was 4-H, yeah, 4-H extension.
You mentioned about the importance of how you try to get the kids today to do the illustrated speeches. I would say that looking back, the speeches and the demonstrations and the speaking, no matter what anybody does in life, nowadays it may be even more important than it was then, because everybody gets so tied up on the web stuff and writing things. Our interpersonal skills are hurting of a lot of our kids. Well, the importance of learning to to speak and present and to relax while doing that, is a tremendous gift. That when you talk to 4-Hers in their 30s or 40s or 50s, that's almost always one of the things they mention is as a huge impact. But
I'm proud of our county for now when we have most any kind of contest, part of it is an interview. And, so that's, I think, very good. The kids find out, well, it's not that hard to answer a few questions. And some of them are very shy. But a lot of them, that wasn't so hard. And I said something to one of the girls the other day about, well, the interviews for the record books are going to be interview. I said, oh, you've already been through that. Don't you remember when you did for the food fest and when you did for the dress review and stuff? So they hadn't even realized they'd done an interview before.
You guys, you talked about Roundup a little bit. Did you go to Roundup as a 4-H member? Describe that.
Well, at the time, of course, that was a big thing because we got to go and we got to stay in the dormitories at Oklahoma A&M at the time. And all of my family all the kids had gone to Roundup. My younger sister went after. But that was always a really nice thing. And you did have to win the trip to go to Roundup.
How did you win it?
Again, you did kind of on your projects and stuff. Now, they do kind of, now you say you want to go and you fill out another thing. It's not particularly with your record book now. But
do you remember that costing your family? Was there a fee to go at that time?
I'm sure there was some, but I don't think it was very much.
And how did you get there?
I don't remember. I really don't. But we had more to go at that time than go now because each county had a fairly good delegation. And
how long did Roundup last at that time?
Probably, it wasn't a whole week, but it was more of a week. And, like when we went to 4-H Club Congress, I remember, we had the hats we wore. One year we wore the scarves. And so you had certain things you wore to identify you were from Oklahoma. And at Roundup, you were kind of expected to dress pretty nice. It was something.
It was an honor, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And
a responsibility. And I think this is one thing we try to teach in 4-H is that, honors come, but the responsibility is there that you are supposed to be a responsible person and act in the right way. And I think that's something 4-H still does well.
So was the 4-H that soon became Gallagher-Iba, was it in existence when you went to Roundup? It was already built, because that was much earlier.
Well, I probably went to Roundup. I went several years, but probably in the early 40s, I was going to Roundup, or mid-40s anyway, because I graduated from high school in 49, and I know I went several years. So.
it would have been almost brand new because I think they built it in the 30s, if I remember.
Isn't it 75 years this year? Or?
Yeah, something like that. So you were there in the early years.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been exciting.
Gosh, you've been involved in extension for probably 75 years, haven't you? The 100 years.
Yeah, I was born in 31, so by the time I was in 40, I was in
60 and 40.
Involved 4-H. I was involved a little before that because of my family, but as a 4-H member, and then ever since I've been involved in 4-H. So.
Very deserving of the national award.
Well, it's not that you win the award, though it was nice because some money gets to go toward whatever you want to choose. And they have started, when Pickens did this legacy thing, one of the things they set up was a scholarship to help with 4-Hers, and he was kind of involved in getting that started. And so there is one that's my name, and it's to go for 4-H students. And so we're working to try to get that filled up. And you talk to Gwen, they've already got one going.
Gwen's done 2 of them.
We'll have to ask her.
Yeah, talk to her about that a little bit.
Any other things you'd like to share?
I just say the extension service, in my life, 4-H has made a huge impact. I mean, but my involvement's really not just been, extension service involvement's not been just with 4-H. I mean, it may have started with 4-H, but it's been, through everything, working with master gardeners, working with we've been blessed at OSU, which is one of the top land grants in the country. I mean, we're speaking objectively from getting to work with a lot of land grants around the country. We're very honored to be here in the state with one of the top ones, and we've gotten to work with a lot of great extension horticulturists and extension ag economists and all kinds of extension personnel, in business and trade associations that have really made a contribution to the to the growth and development of our states and the individual businesses within our states, and so extensions has many. It's like a big octopus with lots of tentacles, and it reaches out in lots of ways. But it's amazing how many different ways it's crossed our lives and has made a difference, and I think it's made a huge impact on our state and our country. So.
And I think, when I was growing up, like I said, my mother was very active in the Home Demonstration Club and was throughout her lifetime. But when I was in Garvin County, I was very actively involved. When we came to the city, I was so involved in our business, I didn't have time to be. But I think that's a wonderful program, too, working with the women. And
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Moesel, we greatly appreciate your time, and thank you for your contributions to 4-H and to the Cooperative Extension Service. You've been of great value. We appreciate you.
well, it has been a great value to us, too,
Thank you very much.